The Seeking Grace project began in 2013 as the brainchild of Dr. Nicole Joseph, a former curriculum and instruction professor and founder of the Sistah Network, a group to support Black women graduate students at the University of Denver. The project takes its name from Grace Mabel Andrews, the second Black woman to receive an undergraduate degree at the University of Denver. Grace graduated in 1908 with a BA majoring in Latin. While much is known about Emma Azalea Hackley, the first Black woman to graduate from DU in 1900, the same does not ring true for Grace. While Grace's achievement may have gone unacknowledged until recently, she was honored by Black Denver during her lifetime. Her graduation announcement in the Colorado Statement, Denver's longest-running Black newspaper, on June 20th, 1908, is brief, but brimming with pride. An acknowledgement of what W.E.B. Du Bois and other Black elites during this period called racial uplift, a belief that educational success for one bestows honor to all. Grace and other alumni who left Denver to teach in segregated schools often maintain close ties to their hometown, returning often to see their family and friends. In the wake of World War I, as she and other alums took teaching jobs in cities like Baltimore, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Kansas City, racist violence surged across the United States. Over Memorial Day weekend in 1921, Grace bore witness to one of the most brutal examples in Greenwood, Oklahoma, a suburb of Tulsa, where 35 blocks of the prosperous Black district was leveled, 39 people were killed, and over 6,000 citizens of the district were imprisoned in makeshift detention camps for nearly a week following the massacre. Grace returned to Denver to speak at Shorter AME about what happened and to raise funds for Greenwood's people. Many of the clubs and societies that DU Black alumni were a part of, like this fundraiser, were connected to one of the two Black Methodist churches in Denver, Scott Chapel and Shorter African Methodist Episcopal. The connection between the university in Denver and the Methodist Church was strong enough in the first part of the 20th century that its third Black female graduate, Annie Marie Cox, came all the way from Little Rock, Arkansas. The daughter of Reverend J. Cox, the first Black president of the Methodist HBCU, Philander Smith College, she stayed in Denver only long enough to get her degree in 1910 before returning home to teach rhetoric, literature, and modern languages at Philander Smith. Grace's life and those of the ancestors who are no longer with us appear only in glimpses such as census records, yearbooks, and newspapers. There are few personal archival materials like oral histories, diaries, and photographs available to us. We can sometimes find where they worked, who they married, and if they had children, and where they and their families are buried, but we can only speculate about their inner lives and their hopes, joys, sorrows, and loves. When we say we are seeking grace, we are reaching back to reclaim what we can and bring it forward. This project works to put what documentation we do have into conversation with the researchers' lives, alongside the interviews with those who are still with us and have been generous enough to share their stories. By using the past as a bridge and holding a light to the present, we celebrate Black women in all their truth and power.
It has been an opportunity to speak to myself. There's so many times in this world, the world wasn't rooting for us. On September 17, 2017 in Los Angeles, California, a phrase was said that rang throughout the sound waves of every cell phone, tablet, and computer across the world. It was on this day that my idol, Issa Rae, when approached with the question, who were you rooting for at that year's Emmy Awards, proceeded to answer as such, and I quote, "I'm rooting for everybody black." I really am, end quote. Well, it was in this moment that I felt transported to my youth. The very first time that I truly recognized my blackness, this scarlet letter burned into my flesh, as if melanin was a poison that I had no choice but to drink, and the sins of the world saturated my skin because I damn sure didn't ask to be black. But yet, here I am, a little girl looking into the world, hoping to find a reflection of herself, only to be met with a glass ceiling on which I saw the soles of the feet of people dancing upon my dreams, dressed in the latest privilege, a brand that many refuse to admit they inherently own. But when black children are suspended because their hair is considered a distraction, the standard is quite clear. And when black-sounding names are met with more suspicion and less distinction than their white counterparts, the standard is quite clear. Our very existence is questioned. We can't have the hair on our own heads, the fullness of our lips, or the thickness of our hips. Well, not really mine yet. But you know what I'm saying. But then again, it becomes a fashion trend when it's inappropriately appropriated. Selling melanin $30 for an hour session or $500 for lip injections. Meanwhile, all our lives we had to fight for this, to simply be okay, for my right to simply take up space without being of service to you, of entertainment to you, or being considered a threat. So listen, I'm rooting for everybody black because I remember that Hattie McDaniel, the very first African American to win an Oscar, was let into the all-white award ceremony only as a favor. I'm rooting for everybody black because I remember that even the 44th president of these United States, Mr. Barack Obama, was still only seen by many as a nigger. I'm rooting for everybody black because I resent the allegation that affirmative action is the root cause of my success, when it is simply there to assure that my magic is acknowledged, my magic, that dynasties before me have poured into my eloquence, because as a black woman, speaking black has become something that I do with pride, because some of the earliest of languages were birthed in the land from which my ancestors were stolen, so my vocabulary and my intelligence in no way deny my blackness, and my occasional to frequent use of ebonics in no way denies my intelligence. So listen, I'm rooting for everybody black because I'm sure that 8 of the Little Rock 9 that are still alive today would be happy to educate you on why we so resiliently created a language of our own, as a proper education was always reserved for those that didn't look like me. So I'm rooting for everybody black because as we infiltrate the spaces that used to be deemed white only, I am telling you that you always deserve to be there. You can compete with any damn body. So I'm rooting for you to show up. I'm rooting for you to break every glass ceiling and challenge every opposition, because when the next generation of little boys and little girls realize that they are black, I want them to realize with pride, dignity, and hope for their future. Their lives do not have to be a tragedy. I want you to wear this skin, this scarlet letter, like a badge of honor, because listen, black people, we do miracles. We walk on water, held up by the sea of beautiful black bodies that came before us. We raise the dead, because living within us is the strength and resilience of our ancestors. So define yourself. You are not the stereotype of your quote-unquote hip-hop culture. You're not a monolith. You are every color of the black rainbow, every tint and every hue, as you deserve to be your own. Not a burden to your race to explain away your individuality, but you're beautiful and unique, and I'm rooting for you. I'm rooting for you because you was smart, you was kind, and you was important, okay? I'm rooting for you because you are elegant and divine. I'm rooting for you because you are soulful and brilliant. You are loud and boisterous. You are meek and socially awkward. You are creative and you are unparalleled. I'm rooting for you because black bodies like ours are still being sold as chattel today. So I'm rooting for you to emancipate yourself from mental slavery so that we can remove those chains. I am rooting for you, the next Martin Luther King, the next Maya Angelou, the next Lauryn Hill, the next Frantz Fanon. I am rooting for you, the next Chadwick Boseman, the next Tessa Thompson, the next Sean Carter, the next Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm rooting for you to be the next you, to be the only you, and to make sure that your world will never forget your name. Thank you.
was born in Alexandria, Louisiana on the 24th of May, 1939. I had a wonderful childhood. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, surrounded by an array of aunts and uncles, my parents, of course, and my maternal grandmother, and my younger brother. And I had a wonderful childhood.
I entered the scene August 22nd, 1935, in Kansas City, Missouri, hospital number 2, and that's significant.
Okay, what's significant about hospital number 2?
Because African Americans could not use the primary hospital in Kansas City at that time.
Oh, wow.
I actually grew up in Denver. My mother and father separated prior to my 3rd birthday, so we moved to Denver. And for the first period of time, we lived in an apartment up over my great uncle's barber shop in the Five Points area.
Okay.
Later, we moved, but still living within the primary African American community in Denver. In fact, when the war started, shortly after the war started, we moved into our home, which my mother and father purchased on 24th and Downing. So I grew up across the street from Whittier Elementary School, attended Cole Junior High School, and then finished at East High School in Denver.
I had teachers in high school who had either attended or graduated from the University of Colorado in Boulder or here at DU.
Were these teachers African American?
Yes, I went to all black schools
Okay.
from the time I started school. I was never in an integrated environment until I came to the University of Denver. They helped you with everything. They gave you information. They helped you with what you needed to do to prepare. You know, there was never a stone left unturned. Although as a black student, I mean, you knew at that time you were probably going to go into an all-white environment if you went to an integrated school. And you just did what you had to do. You had to know the real reason for coming. And the real reason for coming was to get a good education, you know, and that's what propelled you to come. Even though you thought you might have been in threatening environments and things like that with the white students and that kind of thing. But we'd grown up with it. So it was not anything that was foreign to us, you know. But the one thing our teachers did was just to prepare us and equip us with everything we needed to survive in that kind of environment.
The time I was at East High, there were probably about 25 African American students out of a student body of about 3,000.
Wow.
And when you entered as a sophomore at that time at East High School, everybody met in the auditorium, and you sat there and you filled out a rather large form that identified your required classes and then space for your electives.
Okay.
And so I had filled mine out, and then you take it to your assigned counselor. So when I took mine to my counselor, she suggested that mine was not correct because I had indicated a college track, and she suggested that that was not functional, that I needed to look at the areas that I might gain employment when I finished high school. And so there was not encouragement from my counselor in terms of preparation for college, which I paid a cost for because I lined up and took classes out of sequence. I thought Algebra 3 came after Algebra 2. I did not know that you were supposed to put some geometry in between there, you see. So it made it difficult. It made it difficult.
You may have actually read this book by Carter G. Woodson, The Miseducation of the Negro. And in that book, he clearly discusses how counselors would tell students exactly that, that you might want to, not think about, architecture or mathematics or these other sort of scientific areas. So to hear you say that is just really interesting.
Until the Phyllis Whitley YWCA initiated and ran Camp Nozomi in the mid-1920s, there were no organized summer camp opportunities for Black girls anywhere in the region. Just as Lincoln Hills developers had purchased the property and developed it because there were no resorts in the mountains that would allow Black guests. Camp Lookout, the Central Denver YWCA camp in Idaho Springs, was only open to white campers. Despite the Depression years, thanks to the generosity of community donations, Camp Nozomi ran every summer until 1945 when Camp Lookout integrated.
Pre-K through 12th grade, I never had a Black teacher.
Schools that I went to prior to moving to Colorado were predominantly white.
Yeah, I've been in a PWI since birth. All of my schools have been predominantly white.
So I don't remember much of my earlier years in Ethiopia growing up. But when I moved to Denver, we moved primarily because we had a lot of family here. So we made the transition here.
So I grew up in Park Hill, but my mom decided that the public schools, DPS public schools at the time, were not good. And so she sent me and my brother to private school, 45 minutes away from Park Hill. We both got financial aid to go there. It was majority white, very affluent school, and we went there pre-K to 12th grade. So my entire life I went to school with majority white kids. I was one of three black kids in my graduating class. And then I would come home and I would go home to Park Hill and all my neighbors were Black and all my friends in my neighborhood were Black and they all went to East and they all went to George. And we just had very different experiences. And I got made fun of a lot. I got made fun of a lot for going to Colorado Academy. And I almost to a point where I wanted to transfer to East, and I almost did transfer to East, just because it was like from the people in my neighborhood, they were like, you're too good for us, you like school, you're white. And then going to Colorado Academy, those kids were like, you're too Black, you're from the hood, yada, yada, yada. So it was kind of like I was trying to figure out where I fit in.
I think my upbringing and being in Colorado prepared me, for my experience at DU, where being on a predominantly white space wasn't so unfamiliar. And to be in these predominantly white spaces and just knowing I'm just here for a minute, let me go back to my community where I can get fulfilled, where my needs are met. So I've taken on the role with academic institutions, and I really don't expect you to support me in any type of way.
Generally, the high school, the middle school, the elementary school that I went to, I was always maybe 2 or 3 Black students in the room, and so that I unfortunately have become comfortable with that, and so that was not a struggle coming here to DU, where most students who maybe are from a marginalized community, that they've never experienced that before, so that's something that they have to navigate.
I've always been in a classroom with predominantly white students and teachers, so I think that experience definitely prepared me to live in this dual reality, right? So especially at DU, I am a different person as a professor in front of the classroom than I am as personnel for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. So when I'm in a class in front of predominantly white students talking about intercultural communication, my vernacular is different, my gestures are different. And then when I'm working on issues of inclusion and diversity and promoting pro-Black events and pro-Latinx events or focusing on women of color, my stance is different. So I think that I've been groomed to play that role since I was a youngster.
Since I moved to the States, I've grown up around white people, I've been around white people, but I don't know how to say, DU white people were like a lot different, a lot more to take in. I didn't expect the amount of ignorance and privilege that I would encounter. I think the friends I made and the faculty and staff that I got close to helped me navigate DU a lot better as a PWI, right? I don't think I'd ever been to a school that had this many white people, and so many that were so arrogant and so rude and kind of devalued everything about me, right? Without even knowing who I am.
I don't think anything could have prepared me for my experience at DU. First time being racially profiled, there was just a lot of first, and so I don't think anything that I went through in my childhood or even growing up could have prepared me for this experience. And I think even thinking about predominantly white institutions, knowing that even though they're predominantly white, they're historically white as well. So like even though they admit people of color, it's not always welcoming for students of color. And so I think just realizing that and being put in the situation, I don't think anything could have prepared me for it or anyone could have prepared me for it.
I'm used to people assuming less of me and assuming I don't know what I know, which I'm not totally unaccustomed to because that's what's happening to you, right?
Yeah, like this campus could be very lonely, but I think you make the most, if you can make the most out of it, then you can definitely, like, your mind kind of sets the trajectory on how you kind of choose to experience college and your environment, at least in the most sense. You kind of have control over everything.
Because I felt that my life here at the University of Denver was very pleasant. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed being on the campus. I think I got an excellent education.
You're on this campus that was not inclusive. Now we know the terms. Not diverse, because I was one of maybe 2 in the evening program, maybe 3 if you pushed it. So you have this climate that's filled with these external, and then let's talk internal, meaning you have the sense of you don't belong. Just the climate. My entire 4 years here was just was tense, stressful. And when I talk, we dealt with racism. There were examples of nigger on the bathroom doors, holidays that were not acknowledged. So,
although there were no Jim Crow laws in Denver, the city's Black community was subjected to rigid segregation and discrimination. A patchwork of racist social norms, restricted housing covenants, and unequal access to public schools impacted African Americans' ability to live and work where they chose, own property, receive equitable schooling, and occupy public places like theaters, gymnasiums, and swimming pools. During the early to mid 1920s, Denver and the state were taken over by the Ku Klux Klan. Between 1921 and 1925, there were Klan chapters in all 64 counties in Colorado, and the organization grew to be nearly as large and powerful in Colorado as it was in the South. With 17,000 members in Denver alone, the Klan voted allies into the governor's mansion and throughout the state legislature in 1922.
I've read a number of books through the years.
Please tell us about experiences where you felt isolated. Did you believe your identity played into that?
One way I felt isolated, I played lacrosse, which is a majority white sport, and a lot of the athletes here are not just on the lacrosse team, but like in general, are white. And there were actually 3 Black girls on the lacrosse team, which is kind of rare. We called ourselves Blacks, BLAX, like a play on words. It was funny, but like there was often times where we just felt very separated from the girls on their team. So there were like 20 something of us, and then the 3 of us, and they would make kind of side comments, little jokes, thinking that we were okay with it. And the 3 of us would just sit there and be like, this is not okay. And it wasn't really a time where we could speak up. It was like, go to practice. They'd say it and then go to practice. And we'd have to go to practice and carry all of that was had on us and try to focus on catching a ball, focus on run test. So I'd say that was one area. Another area I think is definitely in classes. Most of the time I was one or maybe two Black people in classes, and I think when topics came up about race or something to do with Black identity, all eyes sometimes turned to you, or all eyes didn't turn to you at all, and it felt like you were invisible. I remember this time one of my good friends and I were in a political science class, and the teacher had asked we were looking at the history of affirmative action, and the teacher had asked essentially, what is affirmative action? And this was one of the larger classes, so there were probably maybe like 70, 80 people in the class, and me and my friend were the only Black people in the class, and a white girl answered innocently and said, affirmative action, something along the lines of affirmative action is when you give more chances to people that aren't normal. And my friend and I looked at each other like almost in shock. Like, not normal, but no one else in the class seemed fazed.
I studied political science and communication studies, like I said, and so I would say in both of those disciplines there's a lot of focus on marginalization and who's marginalized and who is not, and why certain people are marginalized and why certain people are not. And so in those spaces, it's very interesting because there were a lot of class discussions where I would feel included, and it would be like, okay, what is this perspective? What is your opinion on this? What is your voice on this? And then in other situations, depending on how the conversation was going, those could be isolating.
I felt isolated all the time, yet I will own where I may have isolated myself, but that is because I've evolved to be where I'm at now. Back then, you just wanted to be included for the moment. There's no question that my identity played into. We're talking back in the late 90s. My identity is relevant to right now. It's about my lens regarding my identity. Okay, then, yeah, it's the lens. So my identity will always it can be a driving force for me, or it can be a driving force for somebody else. But it's going to be a force.
I didn't have any association with the classmates. They were all white. I was the only African American in the class. Wow. So I did not communicate or work with any of the other students. It's probably pretty much like it is now. I'm not really sure what it's like now, but what I've seen, it looks like it's predominantly white. And that didn't bother me. I went to East High School, and that was white, all white, 90%. That didn't bother me. So when I came to DU and found out what the culture was like, it didn't bother me at all. It was predominantly rich white. That was it. I learned how to adjust to that. In other words, I'd go in and sit in the front rather than go into the back. When there were class activities, I made sure that I was up front. Speaking in terms of being isolated, I could have been isolated, but I wasn't, because I think that's a state of mind. I was not isolated. I chose not to be. And I don't think it played in at all into me and myself or anything that I had to do, because I just stepped over it. We felt that we were welcomed here. We felt that they wanted us to be here. And we felt that we were a vital part of the university life. And we felt that what we had to share as students was important, and they would listen to us. But we felt that we did need the group in order for them to be aware, continue to be aware of our presence here. We felt that the group, the functioning of that group was vital to the life of the university.
The burden falls on students of color to do work that wants to change the environment so that it's more inclusive for all bodies, but then also having to do that work that then is not transferable, as I've been told by the Career Center, on resumes, and then finding that my peers get to just come to school and do work, and some don't have to work, and some don't have to put on events that they're trying to teach their other peers about how to be a better white person or be a better person, period. And they get the same, they get the same jobs, if not better jobs, because they get to solely focus on networking and working, where I have to focus on working, schoolwork, and trying to break into these little white boys clubs.
There were many instances where I felt isolated, mostly in the classroom. I've had experiences where classmates would sort of be hostile towards me and kind of negate my either opinions or my lived experiences, and it's hard to always put your energy into defending yourself, especially when you're talking to people who are accustomed to distrusting Black people, and so it was always hard to kind of have to prove myself or, feel like I had to fight even harder than my other classmates to just be heard in the classroom. And so there were times where I felt isolated, and it wasn't common for me for non-Black faculty or professors to kind of stick up for you, it wasn't normal with most of the professors I had. And then when I did have those professors that had the more inclusive space and kind of took everyone's opinions into consideration, you appreciated them even more.
All 4 of my years at DU felt cold once again. I mean, super isolated. The campus just feels segregated. It was heartbreaking. A lot of us were verbally attacked regularly and sometimes physically attacked too. I mean, several of my constituents were egged, called slurs. It was a battle just to exist. We were paying money, tens of thousands of dollars every year to get an education that's supposed to be top in the country, right? We're the Harvard of the West, the East, the somebody. And we're being told, you have no right to be here. We don't care. Slavery is over. Get over it. This has nothing to do with the here and now. And I'm hearing the President of the United States continue to slander, minority population. So it became this, DU was cold before, but then it became a living hell. Most definitely. My mom and I sobbed nights on end, wondering if I was gonna be okay. Making sure that I had campus security walking me from my car door into my dorm building just to make sure that somebody wasn't gonna come and run up on me or, it was pathetic. And it reflected the worst parts of DU.
One conversation with the earth and your ancestors come knocking, quenching your sense with memories that tell you that you're home. The stories whisper past us like a cool embrace, like our children reminding us of our great-grandmothers. The ones who taught us to speak to the stones and to follow the birds and to fight for what is sacred and what is sure. We have built other people's empires, bearing witness to our histories being auctioned, histories bought in blood, stories paid for with the human sacrifice of those that remembered their deity. Packaged in cocoa and caramel, sweet like a Jamaican rum cake and spiced horchata, rich in freedom, drenched in melanin, heavy on their secret sauce. Oh yeah, we got the juice. That's what we made under the pressure.
I have a question.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit more? So when we're doing this, we've done a lot of interviews at this point, and I think that you're the first person that talked about isolation in the way that you did.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with isolation?
Okay, what do you mean I was the only one that talked about isolation?
You're the only person that said, I refuse to be isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, can you just speak a little bit more about that?
You can be isolated if you choose to be.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point. If you choose to be isolated here at Denver University, if you go around thinking that you're isolated, then you're isolated.
Mm-hmm.
But if you know who you are and what you're about,
who you are and whose you are and what you're about, then that isolation doesn't come into play. Because otherwise, it can, and it will if you allow it to. But it's just a matter of your perception.
This is like the perfect transition into like Seeking Grace, because I know that the Sistah Network in Seeking Grace, in the start of Seeking Grace, was very instrumental in doing some of that digging to locate women and so on and so forth. So what does Seeking Grace mean to you? Like, this is your brainchild. And I guess we can do it in pieces. I won't throw too much.
Well, so Kate Crow, I had spoken to Kate on helping me find somebody who was an archivist or somebody who could travel with me, because I went to 25 HBCUs, mainly in the South, and went into their archives and basically tried to find out, could I put together a story that could help me understand what were Black people learning about math, before we started being judged in the ways, that we have since we've integrated, right? I think out of that work came this notion of, the stories are there, but we don't know them.
Go through these shelves and you'll find not everyone's story is reflected in a book. 2 women here at the University of Denver wanted to change that. They have embarked on a research journey that has led them to a discovery about diversity and a student who roamed this campus more than 100 years ago.
Denver was pretty different and DU was pretty different back then.
Back then, in 1900, that's when she graduated from the University of Denver. No one then realized how significant her story would become.
I started looking at the historical record of the university and that there are all of these gaps.
Gaps in her story and in the story of many more DU alums, women of color.
It is important because it's absent. It's not there. And we believe that it needs to be there to give a more complete picture.
I think just a little bit of sort of historical context, I think, is important because it involves, Dr. Tuitt and Dr. Lori Patton. Lori, when I first got to DU in 2011, Dr. Patton was there, and she had just published an article around mentoring and the need for mentoring for Black women, graduate students. And I had been reading, those articles and had been kind of talking to her. And that's where my thought for a proposal to start the Sistah Network actually happened. I wrote the proposal and I basically sent it to him and said, we need some money. Can I get some money from iRise? Can I get some money from, the center? And that's how that sort of vision came to life, because he gave me some money. And then I connected with Anthea so that we could have this sort of academic piece to the Sistah Network, as well as the practice, professional, logistical aspect as well, to be able to sort of come together. And me and Anthea became the Bonnie and Clyde, of the Sistah Network. I really attribute it to, Dr. Tuitt's, belief in the work. And then Anthea's, great partnership with me and, basically getting that thing up and running, on its own, to actually, to be able to continue, because even after I left, she didn't have to, she chose to continue to, run the program.
So just to jump in, we want to say thank you to Anthea for coming.
as I had talked to her before, she is a very important pillar in the DU community. I have benefited from working with Anthea in many different capacities as my supervisor, as a mentor, as a Black woman that I knew I could count on in the DU campus. So to jump in, Miss Anthea, you have worn many different hats at DU throughout the years. And to be just quite honest, you've outlived a lot of your student affairs counterparts. And I want to say you might be one of the longest standing, student affairs, I don't know the new title of it, folks that have been there the longest. Can you tell me about your experience as a Black woman staff member at DU, and some of the roles that you've had?
Sure. Thank you for having me in. This is an honor to be interviewed by you. I've enjoyed working with you and getting to know you and seeing how you have blossomed and developed as a scholar. So this is super exciting. Thank you. I think, I was really blessed because when I was hired, I started with the Center for Multicultural Excellence, which means that the supervisor of our division was Dr. Frank Tewitt, very supportive supervisor, incredible role model in student affairs. And then my direct supervisor was Joanna Leyba. And once again, a Latina, very strong female figure, and one who from jump, both of them actually introduced me around campus. So the second that I would go into meetings with them, they would introduce me to everybody and they would draw these connections almost like spider webs to the work that I was doing and the work that I might be doing with another individual. And so, and they would also do pre-introductions. So if I was going to be meeting with someone, they would send an email to that person and say, she works with our office and this is the capacity that she's working in. And this is maybe how she can work with your project. And so the second day that I was on campus and in my office, and my office was right next door to Dr. Tewitt's, he introduced me to Dr. Nicole Joseph. And that was actually the meeting that sparked the Sistah Network. And so Nicole served as that faculty advisor. And then I was able to serve as a staff advisor, and that really balanced out the development of the organization.
I wanted to have a professional development space. I also wanted to have a space where Black women could just be, could be recognized, could be seen, could be, their esteem held up. All of these things that I actually got from Lori's article, right? So it's one thing to come and go to a workshop, on like writing winning grants, which is one of the workshops that we did. But it's a whole nother thing to have the Sister Circle, which is something that I implemented where, at the end, we would go around and we would celebrate each other. And Thea can testify to this, like on the first couple of times that we met, it was so difficult for women to talk about something that's powerful or that they love about themselves. It was crazy, to the point where that first meeting was just like a weeping, right? Because we were having an ontological experience, I think, of the ways in which academia and society has just ripped us apart in terms of dehumanizing our humanity, who we are. And so it was hard for women to go around and say something that they loved about themselves, but we got that shit together, speaking into each other's lives, hope and, dream, trying to support each other's dreams, to be dream keepers, right? So that was a really important piece to that. The other thing is that when we first got together. So, you know, I don't know what's up with these universities, but nobody really has a list. Like, I was trying to find, where's the list of Black graduate women at DU? And there is no such list. You know, I had to like piece together to find these women, to invite them. And so one of the things that we did when we first started is we did what I called, we co-constructed norms. So, you know, the reality, and we've seen this in the literature and we've seen this in our own lived experiences, Black women can tear down each other. And that's a manifestation of white supremacy, the internalization of white logics and white supremacy, right? That's not who they are, but we've all been sort of socialized in this space. So we have to be intentional about tearing that shit down. So we co-created, you know, these norms.
Practice understanding. Something that I've been working on this year, how do I remain critical and curious at the same time? How am I listening to what people are saying and also practicing empathy and intentional listening? And so we want to make sure that some things are going to be coming up in the conversation. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a Black woman. We're going to be talking about the problems in the world and how they affect each other and ourselves. And so we want to make sure that you're trying to see other people's perspectives, see where they're coming from, and practice and model that empathy, grant that to one another.
There's no room for you to roll up in here thinking that you're better than anybody else. You're not going to be critiquing folks. That's not going to be in this space. And I literally was like nodding my head and talking just like that. And I said, I'm still going to love you if you get up and walk out this door, because that's not something you can do. I will respect you if you do that. And so naturally, you know, it became a culture. That's why I think it became a culture of being so supportive, right? Because I had to set it straight at the very beginning that, you know, we're not finna do that. That's not what we're gonna do.
So hello and thank you to Dr. Tuitt for joining me today. The reason why we wanted to have you in this is because when we were reviewing the footage, your name kept coming up as a pillar to Black women's success at the University of Denver. I can personally speak from my experience that if there was one person I knew I can count on, it was you, Dr. Tuitt. There was a lot of tears, a lot of laughter. You were a thought partner as well as a mentor, and honestly the reason why I came to the University of Denver. So I wanted to make sure that we had you front and center. My first question to you, and to kind of preface it, is I don't know if this is common knowledge, it's common knowledge amongst the Black folks, but you had a track record of not only recruiting but retaining Black students at DU, a lot of which seem to be Black women. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Can you talk about your intentional cultivation of Black intellect at DU?
Well, Kalia, thank you for this project and the opportunity to be able to contribute to this amazing work you're doing and will continue to do. You know, I think about this question from a couple of ways. One, when I got to DU in 2004, there weren't a whole lot of Black folks in the School of Education. There was one other brother, and I think that was it at the time. And in my program, during the interview, actually, the one brother who was in the program as a student, Lamont, picked me up from the airport and, you know, drove me to campus. And I knew that if I was going to step into this new position at this institution, it was going to be important to add to the diversity of the students, and in particular, Black students.
Why do you think a project like Seeking Grace is important to a campus like DU, or just like predominantly white institutions in general?
Yeah, there's so many different ways I can answer that question. I think the one is Seeking Grace has the profound potential to make visible and make seen folks who unfortunately probably went through their educational experiences feeling invisible because the institution didn't know how to see them for their real, authentic selves. So Seeking Grace provides an opportunity not to correct that, but to acknowledge it and name it and do something about it in a way that honors the women who have come before, right? And so that's such a powerful contribution to disrupting the silences around the types of experiences, in particular, Black women have had to navigate at an institution like this. And folks are so, so committed to doing things the way they've always done them. And so we can't, keep doing things the same way and expect a different result. So centering Blackness, owning its complicity in the ways in which it continues to reinforce whiteness and white supremacy, creating spaces for real, honest, authentic conversations around both the challenges and the opportunities for moving the institution forward. I know you're familiar with Dr. Bianca Williams' work on radical honesty. I think the next evolution of that work is, what does it mean for an institution to embrace radical honesty? That's what we've been trying to do in my current role, speaking both to and naming the ways in which we're complicit, but also articulating in concrete ways the steps that we're going to take to address the problems. Honestly, listen and take at face value that the types of experience students are sharing are actually real. They're actually happening. It's not the student's imagination. It is the environment that's producing these experiences.
It is January 22nd. And we're in the house. So yeah, I really want to have a conversation with you all because I realized that I actually have no idea how you joined Seeking Grace. It's kind of a mystery to me. I know that Patrice kind of guided me in, but I didn't really know a lot about the project. So I want to start by asking both of you, what was your journey to the Seeking Grace project, and how did this project get picked back up in 2018?
There was some event about Seeking Grace at the library, and it might have been them just kind of, I don't know if it was them going over the biographies. I didn't go to the event, but I do remember seeing something about Seeking Grace and the stories of Black women who had graduated from University of Denver. That's pretty much like the understanding that I had of it. I knew there was like an event happened sometime in the spring 2018, because that's what Anthea had, I believe that's what me and Anthea had discussed. There had been an event prior to that, based off of some of the work that Dr. Nicole Joseph had done. And Liz, I truly don't know if you remember like the first meeting that we had.
I can bring that up, that there was an event. I'm more in the sense of it's kind of like the sense of us discussing how we were going to contribute to this process. Because I know, like, at the beginning, we kept doing so much archival work. I'm like, okay, looking at the past. But then I know, like, didn't we bring up the idea of, okay, no, we want to do current women versus just trying to look
yes.
work. Just like, what does that look like? Where can we start? And then that's kind of like the process of taking it to a different direction.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Liz, because now you're bringing back memories to me. Because prior to us joining it, it was women from what you would call like, I almost said Civil War, but World War II and prior. So it was like 1900 to 1945, somewhere along the way. And I think it might have been because it connected to me, Liz's research interest. We were talking about Lit's connected to more recent graduates and kind of doing it more like a qualitative research project. So not just like looking in the archives and looking at past photos, but what would it look like to interview women from 1945 up until the present day, which was 2018. So bringing in more current women and more current perspectives. And then somewhere along the line, having like a conversation, like what would that look like? Would it be us like collecting artifacts, or would it be us having interviews? And I think we settled upon like it would make the most sense to interview women. I don't even think like from that initial conversation we had an exact goal or like a theme we were trying to find, or even like how many women we wanted to interview. We just knew that we wanted it to be kind of like more updated and to get some type of qualitative research experience from it.
I appreciate that perspective, because I think all of this and how DU has propped up this project has had kind of been in the vein of these are the women of the past and that's their experience, and bringing it to the contemporary shows that not much has changed for Black women in the DU environment, which is arguably the whole point of this project. In my perspective, the place that y'all wanted to take it was the place that it needed to go.
To be quite candid, I found working on the project, not working with you and working with Black women, like working with the research team, I didn't find that frustrating. But I think that anytime you do race-centered work, and I do mean specifically like to Black students or Black population, specifically Black women, so we're not like being inclusive in a term of like trying to sugarcoat and say this is about women of color, students of color. No, we're focusing on Black women at a predominantly white institution. I do definitely feel like we received like a lot of pushback. It took forever. I mean, we can all talk about this, and I know Liz, you spearheaded a lot of the things with the IRB process, like just to get to the point to have a conversation like, no, this is like intellectual property, like of a research team and from the Black women who are sharing their stories. So we need to have an IRB process, like, and just having like, just being like frustrated with, so maybe not being connected with a Black woman faculty member that does qualitative research, and like from the get-go telling us how important like an IRB process was, and making sure you're doing things you're following protocols, right, to protect the legacy of the project, right? And so I know we can all speak on how frustrating that is to be, how frustrating it is to be like in a situation like that where you're pushing like, oh no, we need an IRB because we might want to publish this one day, or we might want to do something outside of just like an archival project at DU, right? And just talking about the importance of like sharing that story. So I would definitely say there were times that it was very, very frustrating, very overwhelming. To be quite honest, like if I wasn't working with other Black women on this project, I could have probably just said, you know what, I got my internship credit, I got what I needed from this deuce, right? But I think that's a good segue to like, what was my favorite part of the project? My favorite part of the project, honestly, was working with Kalia and Liz. I felt like not only did we have like a good friendship, we had like a good research and work-related relationship, right? And I think it was an experience. I'll use the eye context where I definitely felt like my self growth from it, right? So I know that I have lifelong friends from there, and I also gained good research experience. And I would say even like the trip and the experience of going to present at the conference in New Orleans was a highlight, right? Because it's the first time you're kind of like putting the work out there, so you can get feedback from other people, you can meet other Black scholars in the field, and just kind of having those conversations where you can say, oh yeah, this is what needs to improve and this is what needs to change, and just being able to be honest and vulnerable with other Black students and scholars, professors, whatever, about your experiences at a PWI.
I feel like you said everything, so I was gonna say the same things, but no, but just thinking about that sense of frustration, this sense of not even, I don't know, it's just like this value, the value of our work. It's just like it was devalued in that sense. It just showed where I feel like we were in positions, okay, we're students, but then I think at the same time too, not realizing the type of power that we had to go over their heads to talk to someone else to get what we needed. So through all of that frustration, I feel like it was a learning process, because I'm even here now realizing like now I'm in my program. I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do to get what I need. So through all of that frustration, I'm thankful for that experience, you know? And I feel like at the end, it kind of led to us having what we ultimately wanted, that experience to showcase these brilliant Black women, and it be about them. Through all of that, thinking about it now, I'll probably do it again. Maybe to change some things, but I would do it again. So it was nice.
I think you touched on something good there, Liz, right? Like going through that situation, it's like you're watching these interviews or you're interviewing these Black women, they're talking about like navigating the system across like decades, different generations of being Black women at DU. And here we are, Black women at DU, having to learn how to navigate, being on a white-centric, white supremacist campus, right? And so learning how we have to go about this space. And you mentioned something too, like you get to the point where you're like, oh no, I actually have power on this. And like, it turned out that Kalia turned out to be the PI, right? And just doing things that you have to do as a Black woman to say, you know what? Sometimes I'm going to be honest, this just might be my personality. You don't need to ask permission. You just ask for forgiveness later if it's needed. Because some people really will try to be like roadblocks or barriers. And I'm not even just talking about researching the things that you want to do. So, or some people just don't know, right? And so it's up to you to like seek the answers, seek the questions. And I even think that's what was so beneficial about having like Kalia like on the team and like having done like research before and going through like the IRB process. Like I honestly would not have known that that was as necessary if it had not been for other Black women on the team, right? And so I think Liz also brought a good point. Like throughout the process, it can try to make you feel like what you're doing is not valued, it's not important, or even like your own self-worth is the value. Like you sit there and you think like, I look back sometimes, I'm like, we should not have had to go through all the things we went through just to interview Black women. Like you ever sit and you think like hindsight's 2020. It's like, I learned so much from that, and that research experience prep me to be like in my program now and feel comfortable to do research and to advocate for myself. But sometimes you look back and it's like hindsight is 2020, right? But I don't believe that other people had to jump through hurdles and barriers the way that we did to get research done, right?
No, they didn't. And you said white supremacy campus. I'm thinking about America, baby. So it's like this. I realized like to be successful, it's like I feel like I'm getting off tangent, but it's like they take our work, want to do our work, but then we try to do our work, we can't do our work. So it's like this continuous battle that I know that we're gonna have to endure. And I just think about my ancestors, like, okay, y'all were strong, y'all persisted, y'all did it, y'all went through all this. Okay, keep going till I die. So it's like, okay, you want to do that? That's fine. I'm still gonna get to where I want to be, and I'm gonna be better than you. So it's all good. It's good.
Y'all already know y'all got me riled up. But I just want to say that I think even in learning how to navigate this, people thought we were shaking the table with some of the stuff that we were doing because they were defying the traditional higher ed, formalities. And I think that it's really interesting to think about, like, if we as the research team did not go over some heads, upset some people, say some things, we wouldn't be here right now completing this documentary, because we would have stopped. Hell, we would have stopped before the IRB. We would have stopped fall 2018 because no one wanted us to continue with this work. And I think that it's very telling of what you said, Liz. This project is telling of being a Black woman in the United States of America. I am with Rachel and Stevie to do a researcher experience interview. I'm going to just hop right in. We're going to have a conversation, so feel free to chime in as you please.
I'm starting off with how the Seeking Grace project really elevates and highlights the voices of Black women that haven't been at the University of Denver. I think about how the Seeking Grace project, in terms of the different research assistants throughout the project, has allowed us to come together in a way to continue working together in all of these different kind of steps of the project and, like, I guess, chunks of it to move it along. And then also thinking about how this is history and the narratives and stories we're learning about Black women at the University of Denver. So I guess really thinking about, I just want people to know that there's Black history at the University of Denver. And I don't think that's something that's highlighted, and it's really taken the Seeking Grace project to do so.
the work is important to me for every reason Rachel had mentioned about it, just elevating the voices literally of Black women who otherwise probably would not have had the opportunity, especially as they're getting older, to sort of share these things back to us on a personal level. Like I mentioned before, just the idea that Seeking Grace existed and there was momentum around it before I even got there helped me see a facet of myself as belonging here.
Those narratives and stories will live, and people can continue to engage with that and whatever that looks like to bring it full circle back in terms of action.
I also feel like it'd be great if people walked away with some questions about like who else has been here, you know? If people who don't identify as Black women are like, you know, I know of someone who was, you know, such and such identity, and like what did they think about navigating literally the campus of DU and the community as well? How did they feel supported in it? And what can we do to understand that more as well?
Seeking Grace, from my perspective and the experience that I'm bringing to it, is about rewriting in terms of like correction, and also in terms of like literal writing the historic record to be more inclusive and less whitewashed. And especially because we're mining archives essentially. When I first came to DU before I was a student, I saw the Seeking Grace exhibit on the second floor of the Anderson Academic Commons. And I felt like it was really cool to see marginalized people, specifically Black women, being talked about publicly and sort of centered, because it was on a wall that's sort of central physically in the library. And so that felt to me like it was pretty performative, but it felt like there are conversations that are happening here, and there's an opportunity to elevate those and try to sustain them.
Be good at loving and learning yourself is one advice I would give to Black women attending DU. I think it's super important to love yourself in whatever situation you may be in. I think my journey at DU kind of taught me you have to appreciate everything about yourself before you do anything. Another piece of advice is find your community and invest in it. Because that's going to be your biggest strength. Finding the people that you can go to when you're having bad days, or just whatever it may be, and actually investing in that community and giving your all into growing something that's bigger than yourself.
So advice for current and future Black women, get plugged in. I would say sometimes the nature of higher ed and education generally can make one feel like we don't belong, since these institutions weren't created with us in mind. Sometimes that can eat at your heart, right? It can eat at what you're trying to do, and sometimes faculty don't have the sensitivity to recognize that level of stress, because it manifests differently in every body, right? Physical body. So obviously definitely get connected, stay focused, cling to whatever belief system that is grounding that sister that's here, be it God or the universe or meditation or family. Just stay connected to that source of energy and relief.
I would definitely say find your tribe. Stick with them, support them. But I would also say find people that are outside of your tribe and connect with them, because if you're just around the same people, you're not going to grow and you're not going to learn. And I think it's important to be around people that are different from you, that are going to challenge you, you can learn from, that you can teach. And I think it's the only way that you can get better and how they can get better. So definitely keep your core group, but make sure to reach out to others.
I would say to find your group, find people that you click with, somebody that can relate to you. To use a big campus, there's a lot of racial tension, there's a lot of things, so being able to find some people that you can go to if something happens, if something happens in your class, like microaggression, anything like that, like finding somebody who can relate to you in some ways.
While not, taking myself, to the grind and the ground and, killing myself basically, to be able to do it in a way that I'm still, centering my own self-care is another way, I think, of thinking about this grace.
So not feeling like you have to be at everything. Like it's not your job to solve the institution's problems that they've manifested and are so comfortable with the status quo. So it's definitely not your job. Get through it. You will get through it. And if you never want to look back, you don't have to.
These narratives and the history that we're gathering, working together to write, this is the history of the University of Denver.
Okay, cool. So I just have a couple of things to help us remind us of our power, who we are, who we've always been as a people, especially as Black women. The feminine, Aztec warriors and empresses, Cleopatras and Nefertitis, Joan of Arc's burned at the stake because the world is threatened by your sovereignty. Your tenderness is like no other. But so is your ferocity. You are the giver of life, judgment's compass, society's advocate, the ultimate gift to all of humanity, your child's hero and enemy. As you juggle the weight of the world and the responsibility of feeding a hungry soul, you balance well, being the caregiver, accountant, plumber, chef, literal milk machine, the world's coping mechanism. You are the best friend, counselor, and the keeper of the secrets of how to get shit done. You are special. Take it for granted, taken advantage of, and taught you deserve it. The rhetoric cuts deep, a burden, a wound that your body hopes to soothe with every rotation of the moon. But yet a blood oath with ourselves to never reduce these beautiful bodies to just incubators and jungle gyms. We are not here for their entertainment, ladies. We are not here for their entertainment. The feminine is the battle cry I hear. It is the sobs, the weighted tears. It is the ability to still smile, the audacity to still hope, the fire to protect, an eternal refuge for displaced souls. It is the permission to love and create, to nourish and heal, even when wounded is all you feel. The feminine, the ability for your compassion to always find wings to soar, reaching as far as your span, doing the best that you can to piece together every other life, even as you mend. I salute you. Allow yourself to be adored with this gratitude. Allow the world to take notice. Let's hope they soon recognize that like a girl and like a boss are synonymous. Let the patriarchy go out of style like Jerry curls and mullets, you know. Shit that we now know should have never existed before entertainment. So I repeat, we are not here for their entertainment. This life is not a game. Our achievements are no accidents. Our dreams are not up for auction. The feminine, the unappreciated driving force of the world within all of us, birthing newness in life, combating death with hope, with potential, laboring for change, building birth canals through voting booths and degrees, multiple, nursing curiosity, priming humanity for the ultimate resistance, the movement, the mission, to change the things we are no longer willing to accept nothing less than what we deserve, as we deserve a seat at the table, a table which we always seem to set. Let us set a fire. Let our voices be the flame. Let these flames inspire. Let them light the way. Let them light the way. Let us not grow tired. Let us grow in faith, in solidarity, in persistence, and we won't stop until the work is finished, in intersectionality, in empathy, and knowing that injustice everywhere, anywhere is everyone's responsibility, in love and in truth. The feminine, that's you. Thank you.
one thing that I can say that's very important about Kalia is that she never lost sight about the vision and the importance of this documentary. This documentary is celebrating and honoring the legacy of Black alumni at the University of Denver. And her not losing sight when challenges came forward, because there were challenges. It was not easy. And even in the midst of this project, she graduated from the University of Denver, and she continued because she knew how important this project was in completing. And she knew that, I need to stay the course and to persevere. That is her dedication. That's her commitment. That's her passion. That's that demonstration. So when it's all said and done, one thing that I want to say to Kalia is, job well done. It's definitely a proud mother moment. I mean, as her mother, to see a vision and an idea that was birthed, and then to see it through all the way to completion, even with the challenges and obstacles, to continue to persevere and push, makes me very proud. And and as a parent, you want to see your child pursue their passions and be an advocate for fairness and justice. And I think that, to sum up, this is what this documentary is about. When you think about the voices of Black women at the University of Denver and how they were silenced or may not have been incorporated, and to have a whole documentary that comes forth that really shares the experience, the good, the bad, and often ugly experiences, but also sheds light to, it's also just, I had a friend of mine that was a part of the video, and she was like, it brought healing. And the area of the documentary that you can see was this story of the experience of Black women, which I think is very important. That's a key element of this. But then also the documentary talks about the folks within the University of Denver who helped to ensure that promoted the Seeking Grace Project. So Dr. Nicole Joseph, Anthea Johnson Rowan, Dr. Frank Tuitt. And one of the things that I felt was that Kalia shared with me, she was like, I wanted to make sure that those people received their flowers. To sum up, I'm just really proud to see the documentary, to see the whole team pull it together and not give up. When other folks might have said, you know what, it's too much, too many obstacles, let's just call it quits.
Knowing all of the many barriers we all had to face, what can I share with everybody about Kalia's drive and ambition to complete this project? Yeah, Kalia is a go-getter. She's passionate, but I also think she has something that a lot of people don't have, which is not just passion, right? Which is not just get up and go. It's vision and commitment, right? To see something through to fidelity, right? And so once you put all of those in there together, I think that just speaks to her character, right? She knows Black women don't deserve like crumbs and scraps, right? So anything that she's a part of that centers Black women.
Definitely agree. Like, when you know someone like that, who's not afraid to speak their mind, push everything out there, those are the ones that's gonna be the greatest leaders. So it's just to see that, it made me like so proud. Like, I don't want to get emotional, but it's just to see that. Like, I just want to say to Kalia, like, I couldn't be more proud of you, and I appreciate the sacrifices that you've made, the work that you put in, the challenges that you've taken on for this to come to light. Your work definitely is not going unnoticed, and you inspire so many. And I just can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Kalia, I think working on Seeking Grace with you has been such a great experience for me. I learned a lot from you about initiative, assertiveness, and commitment as a Black femme. I think in a very unresponsive university setting. That's impacted me and widened my scope of what's possible, and as far as like, what I can do, and how I can also gain that similar level of respect, because my respect for you is just through the roof, really. The things that you gleaned from my lived experience too, I totally felt that you really sat with it, and that it also impacted the way that you see research unfolding, especially in this region, from here on out. And I'm really excited to see what else we get to work on together and how our paths can continue to cross moving forward. I think you're amazing. Thank you for bringing your magic to the project. Thank you for sharing some of that with me. And thank you for helping to widen my scope of what, liberation and freedom could look like. So thank you. You're the best.
Like, people are going to hear how powerful these women's stories are, these voices are, and the administration needs to listen to it, right, and watch it, right? It's for any and everybody. And I think when I watched that video, it once again like reunited why projects like this are so essential, and it really needs to be done like at every institution, right? Every institution needs to track like the legacy of Black women on their campus, right? Because I think a lot of times we're in spaces where we're silenced or we're trying to be silenced. I mean, we experienced that as Black women there from 2017 to 2020, whatever the years were, right? And I'm sure other Black women before us have experienced that, and I know other Black women that are still there are probably going to experience, right? So I hope when they look at this film, they feel some sense of hope, some sense of connection, some sense of like, I'm not isolated, I'm not alone. And I'm very grateful for like Kalia having that vision, because I think it's very powerful. I think most people look at something like, what can I gain from this? Like, how will this help me? But she looked at this vision of like, how can this help other Black women, right? And I think that's a testament to her character. Like, what am I going to gain from this, but how will this benefit Black women in the DU community?